So I finally got around to playing the Witcher series and decided to start with The Witcher 2. So I booted up the game, and once it loaded up the main title screen, this music just started playing. And man, I had to stop and just listen to it for a minute because it just sounded great. Just listen. Gaming soundtracks and also just music in games in general has come a very long way, of course. Those of you who are familiar with the NES, the Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, will know exactly what I'm talking about. Back then, game designers had very limited tech to work with, so they had to, especially when it came to coming up with original soundtracks for games, they had to pretty much make the most out of what they had. A lot of games soundtracks turned out kind of meh, but a lot of them turned out great. Try to think of a classic game like Mario Brothers or Sonic or even what else is it? Castlevania. Is there any sort of is there any particular track or music from a particular stage that you remember, like a boss battle or something like that? Of course there is. There usually always is for these classic games. And those are the ones that always stand out the most because you know the most work actually went into them. One interesting thing I've noticed about original soundtracks and just soundtracks in general in games is I've noticed that a lot of games don't have sound tests anymore. Does anybody remember that? I remember that in Sonic 2 especially. There was a sound test mode. I was like, what's this? Why would I test the sound? I'm pretty sure the music's not like broken or anything, but it was a sound test in order to test your audio equipment, of course. I learned that many years later. But that aside, I always used to love the sound test in games because otherwise I would have to literally just pause the game or find a place where I can just have my character stand so I can just sit there and listen to the music sometimes. Because there were sometimes stages where I would just be like, wow, this music is really awesome. And then I'd find myself just humming that music for the rest of the day. Some of these tracks for me include Mount Colts from Final Fantasy VI, Street Fighter II, Ryu's theme, Ken's theme, pretty much everybody's music from that game. Sonic 2 had an awesome soundtrack, so did Sonic 3, and Sonic & Knuckles for that matter. Sonic Adventure had a pretty good soundtrack too. There were some tracks that were kind of, what is this? But, you know, it's Sonic games, you know, they've always been hit or miss. It's just really interesting to me sometimes where people can talk about how great a game is, how well it plays, like the gameplay and stuff like that, but hardly anybody ever really talks about the music in a game. It's really interesting to me. It makes me wonder if music in games is becoming more, I don't know, non-important, or if it's just something that's just becoming increasingly not really noticed by people. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every single game should have a stellar soundtrack. Some games actually benefit from having as little music in them as possible, of course, like a horror game or something like that, something that relies more on ambient noise and the creep factor. Even more open world games like Dark Souls or Breath of the Wild. In open world games like that, you're obviously not going to want to have music in your ears all the time because a lot of the time they're trying to immerse you in the environment that they drop you into, which makes sense. So there's not going to be music for a good amount of the time until you come up on something that is of significance or an encounter of some sort. Then there's that situational musical score that comes in. It's like, oh, something's happening. So then it kind of so from having no music and then just kind of walking around to having this crazy music start playing, and then you see a creature jump out of nowhere, then it's then everything just sort of blends together, and then it's just that's one of the times when not having music can actually accentuate the parts that do have music. And then there's games like Grand Theft Auto or Saints Row, where the entire soundtrack for the most part is licensed music. Even if you're using music that was created by somebody else, you still have to make sure you choose the right music that'll appeal to as many people as possible, which is why they end up having all the multiple radio stations you can tune into. At the end of the day, I have a lot of favorite songs, and interestingly enough, a lot of them actually come from games. Like, for example, the main theme for Morrowind. It's one of my favorite songs to listen to for pretty much any occasion. In fact, anything by that composer, Jeremy Soule, I believe it is. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but anything by that composer, really, it just sounds cinematic and beautiful and just so relaxing, which is one of the reasons why I like playing Morrowind and Elder Scrolls games so much, is just because of that relaxing score. And then and again, there's that situational music. The music changes when you encounter enemies or when you enter combat or if there's danger around. It's just really, it's another way to interact with your game, more or less. That pretty much does it for my idle thoughts as far as music in games. I'm going to turn it over to my buddy IndieTimmie now. He's been on the show before, and I'm just kind of changing up the format a little bit because I like to keep you guys on your toes. So we just kind of did a pre-recorded segment, so we're just kind of combining them together for this wonderful feature that you're listening to now. So without further ado, take it away, Tim.
First of all, I'd like to say thanks for having me on another video, Nero. It's always a lot of fun being on here with videos with you. Music, as we all know, is important. I grew up listening to rock and metal, and probably when I was about 2, my parents let me listen to a band called ZZ Top, an amazing old school rock and roll band, and ever since then, I've been hooked on stuff like that. Music has also helped me a lot in many ways. Like, it's probably helped a lot of people out there, maybe even some listening right now. It helped me through my depression, definitely, and it can help set any mood. Music can really be important for horror games and movies. Like, for example, Stranger Things. With its recent 2nd season, me and my family binged those episodes, and they were amazing. And I've made tons of comments on how I love the music of that show. It's so unique and calming, like this interesting electronic vibe, but it also has such scary moments in the same kind of music as well. Another amazing example is the movie It Follows. Quick tip, the same person who made the music for It Follows made the music for the RPG game Hyper Light Drifter. If you've never played it, it's an amazing and surprisingly very difficult game. It Follows is another movie with such a unique soundtrack, actually very similar to Stranger Things. So if you've never seen it, check it out. It fits really well with it. Sometimes I actually feel like game devs that don't actually know the power music can have in video games. For example, Kiss Psycho Circus for Dreamcast and PC had a very interesting song mechanic. Every level had a random music cue or something like that. It would change the tempo or change the time of the song or speed or anything at random moments. There were certain cues every now and then, but they had this 4-hour long just song montage that they made for levels. And at just random moments, it would just change, and it was amazing. And I've never seen that in a game before. Before I end this, one thing I absolutely love in video games is music cues during gameplay. Take Shadow of the Colossus, for example. When you meet the boss, this mysterious yet intimidating music plays. But as soon as you start climbing up one of those bosses, a happier, almost celebratory song starts playing, expressing that you're winning. I adore music cues like that. For those Undertale fans, one of the final boss fights had a music cue like that. I won't say for spoilers, but it's pretty obvious and it sets the mood amazingly. You actually feel like you're winning. Music is definitely a very powerful tool in games and movies alike, and it can definitely help save lives. Again, thanks for having me, Nero. That's pretty much all the thoughts I had. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tim, once again for joining me. And that's going to do it for the video, everybody. If you guys would like to share your favorite video game soundtrack or favorite song that so happens to be from a video game soundtrack, let us know in the comments below. I'm gonna get out of here now, you guys. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other, do something heroic today, and demand something better in gaming. Always. This is NeroTheHero signing out. Peace.